Hi guys, it's Casey, and today we're going to be rolling some dice to determine my April TBR. So when I'm filming this, there are a couple of days left in the month of March, so I do think I am going to be able to manage to get everything on my TBR done. It is going to be close though because I decided to add an extra 750-page book to my TBR that was not previously on it, but I do think I'm going to be able to get it in just about in time. I have about 100 pages of Warbreaker left, which I think I'm going to finish tonight or tomorrow, and then I need to read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, but those are the only two I have left for March. So I'm gonna go ahead and call it a success. So if you haven't seen one of my TBR videos before, every month I roll some dice to figure out what I'm going to read. I have created a table of 100 prompts to help guide what I'm going to pick for each month, and I roll two 10-sided die to determine which of the 100 prompts I'm going to choose. Now I do these rolls 6 times because my Goodreads goal is 75, so that keeps me about on track for the amount of books I want to read per year. I frequently end up reading more than that in one month though, but 6 is kind of a good default to keep me on track. So without any further introduction, let's go ahead and get into the rolls.
Roll number 1. 26.
So for the first roll, I got number 26, which is a thievery-based or crime fantasy, which is one of my personal favorite subgenres that I've noticed. And for that, I will be reading Jade City by Fonda Lee. So this book has been incredibly popular lately. I have the first 2, and then I think the third one comes out later this year. I know this is set in a world where jade is a substance that gives people magical powers or enhances their abilities or something like that, but it's tightly controlled by certain crime families, so essentially these mafia type families. But however, something happens that shifts the supply of jade, so it's a lot easier for people to get a hold of, and this follows, I believe, 2 rival crime families as they try to get control of the jade situation again. So obviously there is the organized crime element to this, which does make it fit in the crime fantasy category that I'm looking for, and I'm very excited to read this. I've heard nothing but great things, and again, this is like a subgenre that I really find myself enjoying, so I'm very excited to get to this book. This has definitely been a high priority for me ever since it really started taking off last year, and I just cannot wait to get to this book. So we are off to a strong start on this TBR.
Number 2. 53.
Roll number 2 was 53, which is a low fantasy. So for this, I'm defining a low fantasy as anything that takes place within a contemporary world but has some sort of fantasy element to it, as opposed to high fantasy, which takes place in an entirely fictional fantasy world. And so based on that, for this prompt, I'm going to be reading The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Now, admittedly, I'm not 100% sure how to categorize this book because I haven't read it yet, but I do know based on the plot summary, there are fantastical elements in it, but it does not take place in an entirely fantasy world. So I'm gonna go ahead and call it low fantasy, even though it might be more of just like a fabulism or speculative fiction kind of book. We're gonna count it. So what I know about this book is it follows a girl as she is questioning some decisions that she's made in her life, and she finds herself in this place called the Midnight Library, which is full of books that basically read as alternate versions of her life. They allow her to examine her life if she had made a different decision in a variety of different moments. This is another one I've heard a lot of good things about, but I don't know too much about the plot. But I'm really looking forward to reading this one because something about examining your life choices and being happy with the path that you've chosen in life, or examining kind of what got you to where you are, is something that I feel like I could really resonate with right now as I'm going through a very transitional period. And my roommate read it and really enjoyed it, and I generally trust her taste.
Number 4. 13.
Roll number 3 was 13, which is Start a Series. So for that, I'm going to be reading Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. While this is part of the greater realm of the Elderlings universe, Fool's Errand is the first book in the Tawny Man trilogy, which is the 3rd series in that universe. So I don't know a ton about this one, and the blurbs on the back of these editions are pretty spoilery. They usually reveal some things that don't happen until almost halfway through the book, sometimes a little bit later. So I will not be reading that to sort of figure out what's going on. But I do know that this series follows Fitz and the Fool again, who we followed in the Farseer trilogy, but we didn't follow them in the Live Ship Trader series. So this follows them again. And I believe Fitz is in his 30s now at this point, and I think he is tasked with helping to find one of the characters' missing child. So one of the characters from the previous series has now had a kid, and I think they have gone missing, and it is Fitz's job to find them, I think. But either way, I am extremely excited to read this. I've now read 2 series by Robin Hobb, and I really loved them both, especially the Live Ship Traders. That one was just amazing. So I'm really excited to read another series by her, and I am excited to get back to more Fitz and the Fool interactions. As much as I loved the large cast of the live ship traders, I did kind of miss Fitz, and I'm really excited to see the Fool again. As the Fool might be one of my favorite characters that I've encountered in fantasy in general. I really adore them. And hilariously, I find myself looking at this and going, huh, that's not that long, because even though it's almost 600 pages for a Robin Hobb book at this point, that's a short one, so looking forward to starting this series.
Roll number 4, actually this time. 35.
So for the next roll, I got 35, which is an author I've read from before. And for that, the author I've picked is Brandon Sanderson, and I guess I'm just adding one of the largest books I own to this TBR, and I will be reading Words of Radiance in April. I am so excited to read this book. I have been wanting to pick this up since I read Way of Kings, but I knew that I needed to read Warbreaker first. So I read Warbreaker last month. So I'm going to get to Words of Radiance this month. I put it in this slot because obviously Brandon Sanderson is an author I've read from before, even though I could have put a lot of things in here that would be shorter. And with Fool's Errand and Jade City on this TBR, this is not going to be an easy month. But regardless, I am so hyped to read this book. So I really struggle to explain what the Stormlight Archive is about, but this is the second book in the Stormlight Archive, the first being The Way of Kings. The Way of Kings follows a couple of different perspectives, and it is this large, huge, epic fantasy world. And we're following these various characters as they're watching history unfold and repeat itself. And this mythical order called the Knights of Radiance might be returning to Roshar. But I am very excited to read this one. I know Words of Radiance is a lot of people's favorite in the series, and I loved Way of Kings so much, I cannot stop thinking about it, and I'm so excited to get to this despite the fact that it's over 1,000 pages. What am I doing?
Roll number 5. 45.
The next roll I got 45, which is urban fantasy, and for that I'm going to be picking Battlegrounds by Jim Butcher. So Battleground is the 17th and most recent book of the Dresden Files, so once I read this one, I will be completely caught up with everything that is published, which hurts me just a little bit. It's been just like a nice thing that I've been looking forward to every time, and now it's gonna be gone. I don't know how to feel. But I'm gonna go ahead and give my standard and highly inadequate Dresden pitch and say that, broadly speaking, the Dresden Files follows Wizard for Hire Harry Dresden as he works as a consultant and a private investigator for the Chicago Police Department, and he works with them to solve all manner of crimes that may have been perpetrated by or influenced by some sort of a supernatural element. And very quickly within the first couple of books, this universe expands into having a much broader, world-ending, huge fantasy scope while taking place primarily in Harry's home city of Chicago. And without getting too deep into my thoughts on Peace Talks, which I did read last month, I know that Peace Talks and Battleground were released very close together because they were essentially kind of one book that just got broken up into two pieces, and I could definitely tell that when I read Peace Talks. And when I talk about Dresden books generally, I say that about the 50% mark to the end is always an absolutely wild ride. Everything just kind of comes crashing down, and so if we imagine that Peace Talks was the first 50% and that Battleground is going to be the last 50%, does that mean I'm going to be experiencing the last 50% of a Dresden book for the entirety of a Dresden book? Because I don't know if I'm like mentally prepared for that to happen.
And roll number 6. 96.
And the final roll for this month was 96. And the prompt for that is an author with the same first name as me, so Casey for that. And for that, I'm going to be picking Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. So this is a, I think, new adult romance. I'm actually not sure on the age category. Regardless, this is a romance book that follows the first son of the United States and a prince as they basically go through, I think, an enemies to lovers relationship. I think they are at some sort of event together and they're seen fighting or getting into some kind of shenanigans that they shouldn't be, and then their PR team tells them that they need to act like friends for a while to kind of smooth things over, and in doing that, I think romance ensues. This is a book that a ton of people have read and have talked about, and it's one that I've actually been very interested to read, despite the fact that romance is not something I typically read. Something about this one and the way that everyone adores this is really making me very curious. So I really hope I enjoy this one as much as everyone else seems to, and it will be a nice break from all of the extremely large fantasy books that are on this TBR. So this plus Battleground is my April TBR. This is bigger This is bigger than March's TBR, but maybe not after you add in Court of Silver Flames, which wasn't originally on my TBR. This is not impossible. This is definitely doable for me. I usually read a little over 100 pages a day, and I think the math checks out that if I read 110 pages a day, this entire TBR gets read in April. That being said, it's April, which is typically one of the busiest months of the semester for me. So we'll see. All I had to do was not put Words of Radiance on there, and it wouldn't have been quite so ridiculous. Overall, I'm really looking forward to this TBR. I've really enjoyed the dice rolling TBR thing that I've been doing, but sometimes it puts books on there that I'm less excited for. I'm excited for every book I put on there. Every book I put on is a book that I want to read, but this month, pretty much all of them are ones that I'm like actively very excited to get to currently. So I'm hoping that even though this is a really long TBR, page count wise, my desire to read them will help me get through them a little bit faster, because I'll need the help. I think that's all I've got for you guys today. If you'd like to keep up with what I'm reading, I have a link to my Goodreads down in the description below, but other than that, I'll see you guys next time.